In today's vlog, I want to do a further discussion into magic. Specifically, I want to talk about individuals who have a tendency to seek magic in the modern era, have a tendency to want to use fancy names and titles for their practices. Now, this becomes a problem in two different areas. The first area it becomes a problem in is a lot of these individual practices aren't exactly defined, or if they are defined, which is the second problem, they're defined through UPG, or unverified personal gnosis. UPG is very critical and important when we talk about any form of spirituality, magic, mysticism. It's all about the self-experience. When you become a spiritual individual and you try to manifest your will or to influence the world around you through your different arts that you do, it's because you believe it's possible. Not everybody believes in the ability to use magic or different type of energy work, and that's fine. Everyone's welcome to believe in whatever they want. They will continue to do so. However, there is a large amount of individuals that do believe it in all of the different arts in one way or another. Sometimes they believe only one art is possible. Sometimes they believe it's multiple arts. For example, some people believe in just prayer. Prayer is a form of magic. It is appealing to some form of deity to have some sort of assistance brought forth into this world. It is still interacting with beings that you can't necessarily see. You might sense or feel them or believe that you're feeling them, but there's no concrete evidence behind it. A lot of people try to reconstruct and recreate what they believe might have been done in antiquity. Now, they might do this for various reasons. They might be drawn to it because of different types of exposure they've had to different type of media, whether that be fantasy and fiction through games, books, and movies, or it's just reading that they've done, or perhaps they're just a little jaded based upon the major mainstream spiritualities and religions that were introduced to them based upon their upbringing in the country they live in. Whatever the case may be, people have a tendency to be drawn to it. So they, of course, want to look for labels or terms that really feel right to them, that sync with them, that make sense to them. Then you start picking up books, and then people have their opinion on what it is. And then you try to follow that person, that practitioner's, what they're trying to do and what they're trying to accomplish. The problem is when people try to revive old terms. We have old terms from a whole bunch of different traditions around the world. Today, one of the most popular terms, in my opinion, especially in America, ends up being the term witchcraft. Now, here's my pseudo challenge for you. If you are an individual who considers yourself a witch or practice witchcraft, go to the comments below and define witchcraft for me. Don't only define it, but give me examples of what makes a particular magical practice witchcraft versus any of the other multitude of magical practices that are out there. For example, what's the difference between just basic magic, ritual magic, magic that is done through Kabbalah, magic that is done through the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, magic that is done through ceremonial magic and different religious traditions, something that is done specifically in voodoo or druidry or wizardry or whatever the case may be? What specifically makes that witchcraft? Now, the reason I pose that one specifically as witchcraft is probably one of the most widely known terms when it comes to magical practice. However, even people who say that they claim to practice witchcraft can't seem to define it without giving an explanation that dives into a combination of other practices. I think the closest one that I've heard that I can use myself is a collection of folk traditions. But then you have folk traditions from all around the world. So what makes it witchcraft versus the term for the folk tradition of that particular culture that you're calling it witchcraft for? If you look at the term witchcraft, we have an example in England of where it was first put into law being outlawed and illegal. Let me pull this up. 1563, 5 Elizabeth I, Chapter 16, an act against conjurations, enchantments, and witchcraft. You can look that up, of course, confirm that document and that record. When that word was written as the word witchcraft, as the modern English word witchcraft, I don't mean old terms that translate by many people into witchcraft, but when it was first used, it was used as a negative, evil, and outlawed thing. But even this didn't technically define what actually constitutes as being witchcraft versus just using it as a broad label, which I think is how we get into our modern interpretation of what people think witchcraft is. I find that a lot of individuals, when they try to describe witchcraft practice, if they do at all, they will typically use things that are straight out of different traditions, whether that be Hermeticism, the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn as an example, as I'd mentioned earlier, or Kabbalah, Jewish mysticism, or like, again, a kind of collection of local folk traditions from different European countries that they just kind of blended together in their own way. So then why are we using the term witchcraft versus just magic and generalized magic as a whole? Magic itself, of course, is a more modern term, which, as I'd mentioned in our videos, the way that it is used today, I would actually say Cornelius Agrippa probably started using it as an umbrella term for these different types of arts when you hear the word magic that you think of within the mystic realm, so to speak, even though I would argue a lot of the sciences could also fit under the term magic. Again, referencing my notes because I don't have everything memorized. During the Renaissance, Cornelius Agrippa, who born 1486, passed in 1535, used magic as an umbrella term for all the occult arts while using, I believe it was pronounced Goetia, as a subclass referring to superstition and popular belief, and theurgia, which indeed means the work or deed of God or divine work. So these, of course, there's different references I'll share for this. You could, of course, look it up as well. One of which, of course, is Dr. Pucca, which Angela Symposium, I've referenced her in other videos before because I think she's a good source, but we can also look at like Etymology Online or different definitions through Britannica as well. It talks about different definitions of magic and it being used more universally just for generalized energy work. That is a modern concept. I think a lot of people too use these older terms because they're trying to find connection to the past, even if we don't have a clear record of what they used to practice back then. Witchcraft specifically ends up getting kind of wonky because if you look at my History of Modern Witchcraft video, we have most of what people use today as modern witchcraft through Gerald Gardner and through Raymond Buckland. So they started pulling these different arts together, and there is evidence to suggest that Gardner did, in fact, draw from the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn and the Kabbalah in order to form what he called Wicca. And then a lot of what people call witchcraft today is based around some of this creation of modern Wicca back in the early 1900s. So that's just one. Now, we also have other ones that are starting to pop up more recently, like, for example, the Old Norse practice of Seidr. We don't know how Seidr was actually practiced. We do have some accounts in some of the sagas and Eddas that list out descriptions of Seidkona or Volva, staff bearer, practicing Seidr. And it was always a woman, unless it was an ergi, a very unmasculine male who was practicing it. But they have these Seidkona and Volva going up on these daises, these raised platforms, singing and drumming and communicating with spirits to either foresee the future through a spow, like foretelling the future, or manipulating or twisting the future, spinning weaving the fates, so to speak, to make things happen. Some people will say the term Seidr is the Old Norse word for magic. That's not true. We actually see multiple different sources, including The Viking Way by Neil Price, which specifies 5 different categories for magic that existed in the Viking era. Galdr being one of them. Galdr actually is a modern Icelandic term for generalized magic in a way, but the other thing you need to consider is when you look at stuff like this, like Seidr, which according to the Viking Way and other sources as well, apparently it was more akin to a type of shamanism. It was ingrained in the culture. It wasn't a separate act. The religion wasn't a separate act either. You're talking about a different type of people, different culture, different way of thinking. And you can't take, well, you can, but to me, it's causing confusion when you take modern concepts and try to inject them into the past and assume that people of the past think about things the way we do today. We have a lot different knowledge available at our fingertips. Most of us are literate and are capable of reading. We have the internet to do research, good and bad research. We have a whole bunch of different authors now. We have so much different things now to influence the way we think about things and the way that we see the world compared to how they did back then. And as mentioned, they have these different arts that today we might put under that category of magic. Again, from Agrippa and individuals like him who started like 15th century on, where we're starting to use this term magic to think about things on a bigger scale, and we're looking at different practices from around the world. Back then, it was just localized. They didn't have that same concept for a word. They didn't need a word like magic back then because what they did in their practices was localized and understood. Now, arguably enough, there's a lot of people who try to use the term Sather. There is a book I got, which I've not read yet, just got it in the mail the other day, The 9 Worlds of Say the Magic, which apparently is supposed to go over some of the ways that people have reconstructed the way that they believe they should reconstruct Say their magic. I don't know how good it is, but so far I'm skeptical when I hear stuff like that because it goes to the same thing with witchcraft. We have this term witchcraft. People used it in a certain way. People use it differently today, and I think the same is going to be true with Sather or any of the other practices that are out there. If there's not a reoccurring practice that has happened for multiple generations and is an unbroken line, and it's consistent with the way everyone practices it, I don't understand the necessity to use that old term versus just using the generalized term today that we have. We have the term magic that can apply to a lot of this. A lot of people are like, oh, well, am I a witch? Am I a druid? Am I a vodeva? Am I this? Am I that? You're a magician. If you're practicing magic, you're a magician. Like, do you need a more centralized title to describe one practice, especially when a lot of people have a tendency to mix different arts together? Again, I encourage UPG. I think UPG makes a lot of sense. But what makes someone a witch or a druid or a shaman or a seer, a magician? There's all these different terms in all of these different cultures throughout all different ages. What specifically makes someone one thing versus the other? Especially if they're going to be mixing and blending anyway. People are doing it in their own way. I think it makes sense to, focus on a particular path and try to research it the best you can and check out stuff like these books where they try to reconstruct them and see how they go about doing it and adapt it in your own way. I highly encourage that. The main reason I'm making this vlog is because when people get online or they even write books, especially when they used to write books back in the 1900s, when people started writing books on these topics, they come across or they attempt to come across as like, this is the way it is versus this is the way I interpret it. I'm seeing a lot more people do this today. Now that there's the ability to fact check more individuals that make videos, they're getting called out when they make up BS or they repeat BS without having concrete evidence of where it came from. So just a few thoughts. I know this is a little bit longer video, but it's something I'm pretty passionate about. As somebody who likes to research, read books, and hear other people's opinions, I want to go back to original sources that are credible sources. And if you are making something up, that's fine. Just let me know you made it up. And if you know where you got inspired by, let me know where the inspiration comes from. I'd love to read the original inspiration and hear your thoughts on it. I don't know if we necessarily have anyone who's the supreme authority that gets to say what's what is or is not witchcraft, what is or is not Sather. But if everyone just keeps using it for everything, it becomes meaningless after a certain amount of time, right? If everyone just keeps labeling whatever they want as the term witchcraft, then where do we draw the line? If anyone can say, well, it's witchcraft, then don't get mad when people are saying, well, this evil act or satanic act or whatever cruel, terrible act of what is perceived as magic to them is magic, and specifically as this is witchcraft. That evilness is witchcraft. Well, witchcraft is not like that. Yeah, but if we don't have an official definition or term of what it is, then they can use it however they want, just like you are. Just some food for thought. Share your thoughts below. Like I said, if you are a practicing witch or you do practice witchcraft, even if you just study it, what's witchcraft? Thanks for watching. Catch you in the next one.